Blacksmith of the Apocalypse. By Arcuser. Chapter 1321. Plugging the Ways. The team rushed through the decimated entrance, into the mysterious bunker. At their front were neither Adam, nor Mike. Leading the pack was Ellen Culpepper, the slime rancher, ferociously charging down the corridor leading into the bedrock. Right behind her was Tecker, the bulwark, shielding her in case any especially motivated guard tried to stall them. With the tank hot on her heels, Ellen would only stop whenever they came by hallways splitting off their path. Every time she stopped, a group of grey and metallic slimes would leave her sleeves, summoned from her pet space. The slimes ballooned up and blocked the various pathways completely. Passing by, Linry would also stop, putting blessings and buffs on the living makeshift walls. Thanks to Ray and Misto being able to passively scout out the interior of the base, they had a rough plan of its layout and knowledge of where the captives would be held, which allowed them to come up with this weird plan. The most important thing right now was reaching and freeing the captives as quickly as possible. By rushing into the base before they could react, they planned to get in as far as possible, while blocking any way that would allow the enemy to stall them by attacking from behind. Although the metal and rock slimes Ellie used to plug the tunnels wouldn't be able to stop the enemy for good, the team was confident that they could fight their way back out, as long as the captives were okay and couldn't be held as hostages. Leaving rows of plugged hallways in their wake and the corpse of the occasional guard getting in Ellie's way, they followed Misto's and Ray's guidance deep into the bunker. Apart from using the mist for scrying, Misto was also able to scout the corridors and rooms ahead of them by surrounding himself in a fixed field of fog, hiding their group in the process, too. Alarms had been sounding soon after they entered the facility, but there had been an excessively low number of guards trying to get in their way. Even if they had not plugged all the ways behind them, Mike doubted they couldn't coordinate to stop or stall them. The party made quick progress with no damage so far. The Chosen was getting doubts when they heard a commotion from the front. Misto gave the sign that there was an ambush. A big group of people had assembled around the next bend. Just when Mike started questioning the mission, there was suddenly the expected ambush. "What is this fog?" someone asked. "Did the air filtration malfunction again? Shit, why did the subject have to revolt at such a time? Now we have to fight them in this fog." Hooey, there is no guarantee of what happens in such a thick fog," a guard said lecherously. Mike's sensitive ear picked up their conversation, but it was everything but the talks of people waiting for them in ambush. From the fragments he picked up, it seemed there was a different situation attracting the enemy's attention. "Let's me filter out the small fries," Ellen exclaimed, eager to further prove herself on this mission. The slime rancher had already proven invaluable when crossing the mushroom biome, but it didn't seem enough for her. She wasn't trying to prove anything to them, but to herself. After being rendered helpless in the battle at the tournament, Ellie's self-esteem had taken a hit. Mike understood it and gave her the sign to go ahead. Whatever the situation on the other side was, it stayed true that they had to get rid of them. Gah! What is this? What is this? Ah! Get it off! Please! It burns, help! The next moment, their lazy talk was blown away by screams of fear and pain as Ellen began firing a barrage of acid slimes into the crowd. "My fa-see! You are gage!" Unless the target was protected by a kind of barrier, Culpepper's babies were able to ignore armor to a certain extent, seeping through cloth and the gaps of equipment to directly deal acid damage to the opponent. "Someone is firing, slimes from the fog. Be careful!" Someone finally called out. It didn't take long for the guards to realize that there were enemies in the fog, but that realization didn't really help them much, as they couldn't do much but defend against the flood of acid slimes. "We need reinforcement at the west cor." His voice fell silent as he suddenly began splitting into 3, cleanly cut, vertical slices. "No you don't. Wow, these things are really incredibly sharp," Ellen commented after using her new weapon to end someone who tried to call help. She wanted to slash him, not make sashimi. "I think I know what is going on," Ray suddenly said. It seemed that the shaman shared the same doubts as Mike. "I can feel the aura of great turmoil from our destination. Looks like the captives are staging a revolt at the cell blocks," the Saint of Solfium shared his conclusion. "Except, these guys are not simply captives," the squawky voice of the goat demon suddenly sounded. Seth looked at Tunomol in surprise. Only now did he realize that the goat had not been with them the whole time, despite charging in together with them. In his hands, the goat held a stack of papers. "Where were you?" Mike muttered, more shocked by the demon's sudden appearance and disappearance than by the contents of what he said. However, the artificial druid's face grew concerned at what he had just heard. What do you mean? Adam asked, concerned. Emerald City had done horrible things to people to create resources. They had expected as much in this place, but Tunamol's tone seemed to suggest that this was not the end of it. I will answer both your answers at the same time. I went to look around a little to find out more, while their attention was somewhere else, the demon said, not explaining how he got past the plugs they left in place everywhere. Look at this. Based on what I found, these people were actually researching the cyberfication of humans that appeared in the unclaimed mountains during the recent months. On the surface, it's to find a cure, however, these papers read more like they were playing around in an attempt to find any way to make use of it as a weapon. He explained his earlier statement, handing them the stack of documents he brought along. They suffered a little when Adam clenched his fists upon reading just a few sentences. His eyes were jumping across the pages with great speed, as anger grew in his heart. By the end, his face was closer to a demonic grimace than a human. Oh, this one is interesting. Didn't you say the barrier suddenly stopped working against the cyber beasts? Ray distracted him with a sudden exclamation. The shaman had been absorbed into reading the one he got and didn't notice Adam's current state. We don't have time for this. Let's get going. We need to help the captives before it's too late. Adam shot him down, not interested in what he found interesting. Mike just nodded grimly and gestured for everyone to go along with Adam's command. Ellie and Misto, who had stopped when Ray spoke up, after disintegrating the group of guards that stood in their way, continued on, scouting, cleaning out, and blocking pathways. Apart from single or small groups of people, they didn't come across anyone until they could heard the noise of battle up ahead. Theirs is a big hall up front, I think that is where they are fighting, Misto informed them. Ray confirmed his suggestion. What are we waiting for? Let's get in there, Adam said, determined and charged forward. Chapter 1322. Further than expected. Looks like they advanced further than I expected, Tunamol commented on the scene that played out before them. The moment they stepped into the entrance of what looked like an assembly hall, like a subterranean prison courtyard, they all halted in surprise and confusion for a moment. The scene of battle was so far removed from what they had gotten used to after the fall of the districts that they suffered a slight culture shock. Two groups of people were fighting bitterly, using skills with biomechanical arms, or shooting laser beams from various parts like artificial eyeballs. Both sides bore signs of cybernetic enhancement and transformation, explaining the goat's comment. One side wore the same uniform armor set as the guards they had met earlier. Their opponents were dressed in flimsy hospital gowns and pajamas. If it wasn't for the clear difference in dress code between the two sides, they may not have been able to identify the captives. The next moment, a massive shark merman, the transformed Adam, and a huge anthropomorphic lion, transformed Mike, rushed into the battle. They were the first to recover from the stupor and jumped in to assist the Nightgown faction. The others belatedly joined them. A party of Leave 100 tore through the chaotic scene like a raging wildfire in a dry grassland. Despite being cybernetically enhanced, none of the people in the room could compare to a player who stepped on their path to legend. Especially not with everyone in Mike's party wielding legendary items. Chromium skin, steel wire muscles, computational prediction, or whatever else the traits were called, that they gained through unholy experiments, meant nothing before the difference in level and gear. Luckily, the captives fighting for their freedom realized that the newcomers were on their side when they witnessed scenes like Ellen cutting a guard into ribbons, Shay using a single spell to turn 5 at once into ice sculptures, or Adams using his physical superiority to rip a guard apart with simple punches. Simpler approaches, such as Mike's cutting down people in a more normal fashion, or Misto's assassinations by turning into mist and stabbing distracted guards in the back, were not as eye-catching, but not any less effective. Compared to their governor and the members of Minas Mar, Adam's men lagged behind a little, but they still had a great advantage over the guards, so their fights were not hard either. The chaotic battle quickly turned orderly, as the guards were decimated by the intruders. With the last guard falling, silence followed. There were some people crying in pain and wailing at their losses, but the noise of battle was gone. In the awkward silence that followed, as neither of the sides quite knew how to treat the other, Adam stepped up to talk. "Hello, I'm Adam, the governor of THRES, he introduced himself, causing some whispers among the crowd. THRES? The small satellite city at the edge of Beta. Wasn't THRES destroyed? Where is THRES? Governor." Various voices were speaking in hushed tones. Some knew THRES, some didn't, most had no recent knowledge of the changes there, meaning that these people probably had no interactions with the refugees and friends he was looking for. And these are my allies from Myanmar, he continued speaking. There were even more hushed voices now, talking about Myanmar, the guild, and its assembly of Tree Station. Again, their info was quite outdated, suggesting they were isolated from news for quite some time. We are looking for a group of people from THRES and refugees from Emerald City we were escorting. I tracked them down all the way here, would you know where exactly they could be, he asked honestly. Although they had a rough outline of the base's blueprint, it would have been quicker with a proper guide. Although they obviously talked among each other in hushed voice, nobody from the crowd stepped up to answer him, causing an even more awkward silence than before. Finally, there was an audible sigh and the sound of someone clearing their throat. From the crowd emerged a tall, slightly muscular woman. The hospital clothes couldn't hide the toned body of a warrior. However, her right arm had turned completely metallic, while the transformation was also encroaching on her shoulder and neck. Her right iris had a silver glint and gave off a dim, blue light. Her right, metallic fist seemed quite damaged, with blood and clear liquid leaking from the bent metal shards, yet she didn't seem to mind it at all. I'm Meg Huffin, you could say I lead this revolt, she spoke up, but was suddenly interrupted. Meg Huffin! Mike and Ray exclaimed in unison and shared a glance. Meg Huffin was the woman Lydia had been searching for, together with Mike and Ray, who joined her a little later. They had lost her track in Morintu, where she had been kidnapped by a hashing bird. They had been convinced that she was dead and returned after their hectic visit in the city of bandits. You were alive? Mike followed up on their sudden exclamation. There were some times when I wishes I wasn't and somewhere I was close to not, but I am indeed alive. Do I know you? Meg asked a little puzzled at the cat boy and the weird guy with black gems on his forehead treating her so familiar. Your niece asked the guild master to look for you when you were kidnapped. We were following your track all the way to Morintu, but assumed you were dead when the city master told us that you were caught by the hashing bird, Ray explained quickly. Suddenly, Ray had a pair of hands on his shoulder, grabbing them with an vice-like grip. My niece? She's still alive? What about my brother? Did they get away? Where are they now? The tough woman, that seemed unperturbed even amidst the heaps of slaughtered guards, Wei asking frantically. A warm hand touched her metallic shoulder. They are living in Little Sigma. Your brother is working at one of Myanmar's shops right now, Mike said calmly. Although it had been a while, Mike and Lydia had kept with the issue for some time, until the man and his daughter had settled. Although they had been unable to bring back Meg, they were able to provide the two a better environment than a caravan in the unclaimed mountains. So they are fine, she asked, relieved, a hint of tears in her eyes. Yes, they are doing fine, apart from missing you, I guess. Thank you, she thanked him, wiping away the tears, audibly sniffing back her snot. I'm sorry to interrupt the touching moment, but I think you were going to say something about my people. Adam had waited as long as he thought appropriate before crashing the happy end. The fight had helped let off some steam, but he was still very much in a hurry to get his people after hearing about the experiments going on in this place. Oh, sure, sorry. Your people are probably held further down in the prison block, for they store the materials as they call it, Meg explained. Isn't this the prison block? Shay asked inadvertently. Looking around, he could see barred doors lining the hallways leading away from the big central room. No, they call this place the ward. This is where they hold the precious specimen for observation, us, she gestured at the people in pajamas and hospital gowns around her. They didn't seem very happy about being called specimens, even with the precious in front of it. Thank you. You can leave the way we came. We blocked most of the hallways on the way in, so the way out should still be free if you hurry, Adam thanked and told her how to get out in exchange. He would have liked a guide, but he could not get himself to ask these people to risk their freedom for his people. They had suffered as much under experiments as Adam and his people, probably more. I could guide you there, while these guys get out, Meg suddenly suggested, against everyone's expectations. Are you sure, you could get out now and be free? Why risk this chance to come further in with us? Ray asked worried. Pfft, what are you saying? I'm pretty sure staying at your side will be the safest choice and have the highest guarantee to get out of here, Meg said with a laugh. This is it, everyone. These guys are saying the way out is open, for now. Whoever wants to get out should leave now, she spoke to her comrades. Are you sure, Meg? a woman with platinum blonde, almost white hair asked her hesitings. The long, messing hair hid everything of her face apart from her right eyes. Because of her get-up, it was impossible to judge what kind of augmentations she had. "Don't worry about me. You guys get out first, you can secure our retreat," she joked, playing over her own worries. The white-haired woman nodded. "As you wish. I will wait outside for you." Chapter 1323 The Cells. Adam looked into the cells with disgust and horror. Meg Huffin had led them past the ward and deeper down into the prison block, the place Ray had felt the strongest miasma, even from the outside. The scene explained the source of the miasma and suffering that the Chosen of Solfium detected. Big cells were filled with weak and starving people, covered in wounds and signs of abuse. Many had patches of metallic flesh, completely exchanged limbs, and unfinished, deformed cybernetic augmentations. Unlike Meg, the guards, and the people they had seen in the ward, however, their augmentations were festering wounds, oozing blood and pus, with many turning black with necrosis. Nothing made it clearer why Meg and her people were the precious specimens. His heart ached at the thought of how much these people had to endure to end up in this state. Adam himself was lucky enough not to fully remember his own suffering, but it came at the cost of not knowing his own past, either. Although he knew only the tip of the iceberg of what happened to him, it didn't mean that he didn't know what his comrades went through, and he felt empathy with these people who experienced such horrible treatment. Seeing this also increased his worries. Would he be able to forgive himself, if his comrades had to experience this environment a second time? "Let's hurry. I will go look for my people. Can I leave the rest to you?" Adam asked the Chosen of Mahis for his help. Mike looked at him for a moment, silently. "Sure, go look for your friends. We will take care of the people here," Mike offered his support. While Mike and the party began opening the cells and giving first aid to the captives, Adam and a handful of his guys followed Meg further in, checking the cells they came by. Adam's face turned grimmer and grimmer as they came by cells with people he recognized from their evacuation efforts. They were people he met in the camp when they rested for the night. It meant they were in the right place, but it didn't make him happy at all. Beth, he almost rushed by the cell when he recognized the face of his second-in-command. She was the one he had sent as ambassador to Minasmar in the past, to negotiate their cooperation in THRES. She had been in charge of the camp while Adam had been scouting the path for the refugees. She was like him, a product of the secret experimentation in Beta, where they tried to infuse the power of the Merman into players. Unlike him, Beth had not become a shapeshifter, but gained superior stats through the experiments and some skills of the fish folk. Now, the once brilliant warrioress now in a sorry state. Her face was marred from starvation, with her eyes glazed over from drugs. A dirty bandage drenched in rotten blood covered the stump where they amputated her right arm, while the ragged gown was stained in all kinds of bodily fluids. The worst part was that she didn't even stick out with the state she was in. Almost everyone here was in a similar situation. "Beth, Beth, can you hear me?" Adam ripped the barred door put of the wall and rushed to her side. Tapping her cheek, he was trying to make her look at his face. He didn't even recognize the mess he was kneeling in. "Medic, quick," he ordered their healer. The mutilated woman glowed in a subtle golden light, and her eyes slowly gained focus as detoxification, cure, and healing spells were layered on her body. She finally reacted to Adam's desperate plea. "Bogov. Adam, you are here," she said with relief and a small but warm smile. "Yes, I'm here. We will get you out of here, don't worry. We will get everyone out of here," he assured her, and supported her to stand up. However, Beth's expression darkened a second after he said that. "Not many of us are left, Adam. I might be the last one," she said with a heavy voice. She was not talking about the refugees they had guarded. It was clear that she meant themselves. Adam's group of people. They had been the ones to lead the resistance against the Muir Empire when Beta fell. They had been the ones to conquer back the occupied parts of Beta from the invading forces. They may not have been able to save Beta, but the group of research subjects Adam had saved were a thorn in their side and had become the core of his power as he became governor of THRES. "How?" Adam asked, a barely audible waver in his voice. "We were special. More resilient, more vitality, more interesting to them. They had their fun with us, trying to turn us into robots in all kinds of manners, watching as we suffer through the process. We have to kill them, Adam. They have to die, all of them." The nails of her remaining hand dug into her palm, as she clenched her fist. A wrathful fire was burning in her eyes, warming Adam's cooling heart and chasing away his sadness. She was right. They were not done here. He could always mourn later. We will find whoever is left and get everyone out of here first, and then we will lay waste to this place, Adam promised her, after the embers of wrath spewing from her eyes had ignited the fire of vengeance in his heart. Beth nodded and Adam handed her over to one of his men, so the healers could keep treating her, while he and the other kept looking for their own. What about the people from Minas Mar? One of his men asked. Will they agree to slaughter everyone here? He asked, a little worried. Nobody doubted his decision. If anything, they couldn't wait to slaughter whoever did this to Beth and their friends. Did you guys ever hear about the Tower Master of Minas Mar? Adam suddenly asked. His comrades looked at each other, but they knew nothing about him apart than him being a guild master called the Tower Master and that he was a blacksmith. Not many know this, but the Tower Master has a few stories you can dig up with the right sources. Most of them have one thing in common: he shows no mercy to people who overstep the line. When he found weasel people abusing their illusion powers to rape and abuse people in Y City, he trapped them in a burning building, slaughtering them all with his own hands. Do you think people following such a man will stop us here? He asked them seriously. They were a little shocked to hear such a story about the Tower Master of Minas Mar, but the few who worried had their worries calmed. Mike and his party might not help them, but they were unlikely to stand in their way. Hey, if you start killing these assholes, you can count on us, too. Everyone here will gladly take the chance to settle their debts, Meg Huffin commented, before taking the lead again, to bring the further into the prison block. Following the short break, they quickly got back to freeing people and looking for their friends. Beth was right. Of Adam's men that had been captured, only Beth and 2 others had managed to survive the suffering and pain of the experiments. However, the other 2 were even worse off than Beth, as they lacked both of their legs and an arm, each, and had to be carried out after emergency treatment. Most of the captives were no better off than Beth and were technically crippled for the rest of their lives. Even in a world ruled by the system, they would need high-tier healing magic to regrow limbs or organs. Apart from users of such magic being rare, it would also cost a lot for such an expert to put in the time to heal such a big wound, but Adam was going to eat those thoughts later on. Meg showed them through the prison block, although she didn't quite know the way herself after a while. She had not stayed here for long. Soon, they had opened all the doors, whether by force or hijacking the door controls. Having reached the end, Adam also joined the effort to evacuate the people. He had transformed into the massive Merman Berserker and was carrying 3 heavily injured people on his back as they returned. Adam, you are back. Bring them to the ward, please, Shay greeted him upon his return. We set up a defensive perimeter over there, he added, as he led several of Ellen's slimes to carry back more of the wounded. When he returned to the big room at the ward, his breath stopped at the sight for a moment. The whole place had been turned into a sick ward and was covered by an AoE healing skill, as well as covered by a brilliant barrier. He watched on, as people started healing the moment they entered the area of effect, and it was not just superficial wounds healing, but he could even see limbs slowly regrowing, by simply being inside the skill. Beth, who had her arm amputated right at the shoulder, had already recovered her limb all the way to the elbow. At the center of the skill stood the one responsible, Linri, the priestess of the fount. At this point he realized, that all the people he thought would have to live the life of a cripple, would probably walk out of this place, healthier than ever before. Chapter 1324 So the reason that the barrier of Emerald City fell was because these guys tweaked with it. To be able to infiltrate Emerald City with these augmented troops, Adam came to the ward in just the right time to hear the end of Tanamol's explanation. How do you know that? He exclaimed, asking the goat about what the demon had spent the last half-hour explaining. The demon's goat eyes squinted at the governor in disdain. You would have known if you had let me finish earlier. Tanamol blamed him for cutting him off some time earlier, when he just returned from his exploration. After Adam apologized profusely, the goat forgave him enough to give him a short rundown. Judging by the documents the demon had stolen from the various laboratories and offices, this place had been studying the victims of the cybernetic experimentation, to turn the technology into a weapon. Learning from technologies like the cyberworms and something like a cybernetic virus, these people began augmenting their own soldiers, effectively creating artificial traits and skills. The goal was the same: all power-hungry people pursued, super soldiers. An easy way to build a strong force. The goal? Taking control of Emerald City, that was shared among several big corporations at the time. However, by tweaking with the shield setting, to allow their augmented soldiers entry into Emerald City, they had also allowed the infected beasts and victims to enter the city, causing its doom. Adam was nodding along, as he listened to the goat's summary of the situation. This all made sense and served only to make him even angrier. He didn't care for the trashy leadership of the city, or the goons that served them, but most people in that city had simply tried to keep their miserable lives one way or the other, surviving in a world that had fallen. They didn't deserve dying for such a vain reason. Suddenly, a series of small explosions rattle the mountain base, and a cloud of dust and smoke clash against the barrier protecting the ward. Many jumped at the sounds, but not everyone was surprised. It had been just a matter of time before the remnants of Emerald City were going to blow their way through the makeshift barriers. "Tenno, activate the formation," Adam ordered him. They had always expected that they would have to fight their way out after securing the captives. They had not come down here unprepared. The whole mountain was surrounded by the demon magic circle he set up in advance, which would curse anyone not marked as an ally. This was why it was important to secure the captives first. "What are you doing?" Beth asked, curious, when she saw the demon start chanting cryptic phrases upon Adam's command. Meg Huffin and the captives that regained a clear mind also listened with interest. "We had to set up a large-scale magic circle before attacking this place, to curse the enemy," Mike explained, while he and his party got ready to defend the sole entrance to the ward, the exact reason they decided to stay here. Whether it was because the construction was rushed or for their own strategic purposes, there was only one entrance to the ward and the prison beyond it. This allowed them to set up their defensive stand and assemble the captives in this place. "Oh, what does it do to them?" Meg asked, suddenly excited. Although this place had not been the worst experience for her, she knew what they did and didn't wish them anything good. "Just the light curse of burden and sluggishness. I didn't have the materials to set up anything proper at this size spontaneously," the goat answered her question after finishing his chants. "They will have a 10 to 15% slow debuff, their stamina will run out a little quicker, and they are 5% more prone to miss their attack and make mistakes when casting," the demon explained the curse. "That isn't as much as I expected," Meg said, a little disappointed. "You try to set a magic circle the size of a small mountain with next to no materials. Let's see how much you manage to accomplish." "I will wait," the demon challenged her with a snort. The impact of magic on the shield protecting the sword of Allah brought a quick end to their bickering. A big group of guards was charging down the hallway, ready to tear down their defenses and quell the revolt. It seemed like they had used their time wisely and assembled their soldiers while Mike and Adam were busy assembling and treating the captives. The time to fight had finally begun. Beth, Adam, his men, Megan, and various captives had been looking forward to this. However, the ones taking the stage now were the people from Mina's march. With an earth-shattering force, Tekker rammed his bulwark into the ground and erected an immovable shield several times sturdier than Linri's. To his left and right stood Ray and Shay. Like a tank with two turrets, the two started firing skills down the hallway while hiding behind Tekker's impenetrable defense. With no allies in the way, the two released a terrifying combination of powers that made Adam swallow. Shay shot a flood of water from his hand down the hallway, ripping some of the guards ranging between leave 70 and 80 from their feet. As they were struggling to get up or walk against the current, it suddenly froze solid. Many were stuck in place by the ice. Any skills and weapons the guards managed to fire at the casters were blocked by Tekker's shield. The massive man simply stood there, while the spells, projectiles, beams, and explosives couldn't even put a dent in his defense. A few managed to release themselves quickly, but it was too late. They were defenseless when Ray released a wave of wailing darkness that washed over them. At first, it didn't seem to have any effect at all, but then the men started touching their faces. Rubbing at first, then scratching with more and more force, then the screams began. "Get it out! I can feel them crawling under my skin. Get them out! Make it stop! No, spare me! Take them out! Take them out! Please! Oh God!" They started screeching in panic, crying and wailing in pain as they began ripping their own skin from their face in an attempt to release themselves from the invisible bugs inside them. "Stop scratching! Get it together! It's just a trick! UURB!" Some managed to free themselves from the wicked curse, but there was nothing they could do for their comrades, trapped in a hell, where critters crawled under their skin, eating their way through their body. The ones that escaped the curse quickly fell silent as spheres of water enclosed their heads and instantly froze solid. Shay was not cruel, He had no intention to have them drown, so he used the power of Olaf, granted by his bracelet, to freeze them to death in an instant. Adam watched the whole show with his lip pressed together tightly. Maybe it was better if Mike didn't help them. How were they supposed to get their revenge if Minasmar simply wiped everyone out before they could? Mike, can I leave the vanguard to you? I will do the rear guard and make sure nobody comes up from behind, Adam suggested to Mike, as the hallway was quickly cleared. Although covered in bodies, none of them stood in their way anymore. Are you sure? Mike asked, surprised at the governor's sudden request. You are the only one I can trust to take the lead, Adam assured him. And while Mike would bring out the captives, Adam and his rear guard intended to make sure nobody would follow them. Or rather, nobody could follow them. Yes, they would make it 100% sure. Chapter 1325 Back Home. Minasmar, Workshop. Seth spent some time with the girls, catching up, before his attention turned back to his projects. It was finally time to concentrate his efforts on the pile of dragon materials that had been staring at him reproachfully ever since Alzalsar brought them back. The nemesis of the sorceress, Al had shown no mercy when dismantling his corpse. Unfortunately, among the huge pile of materials, not everything she had cut off the dragon corpse was legendary. Although Titus, the dark blue sky dragon, had a big title, it was a lower species of dragon, slightly higher than the lower venom dragon. However, this time, Seth had all the useful parts and not just part of the fangs recycled from a broken item. Taking inventory of the legendary parts Alzalsar brought back, there were 1 Sky Dragon Core, 1 Drago Knight, 1 Dragon Heart, 20 liters of Sky Dragon Heart blood, 20 Sky Dragon Heart scales. Sky Dragons were a species of lower dragon that specialized in magic, as such, their legendary materials were mostly the ones they utilized for casting magic. The heart, the source of its mana and life force. The heart blood, which was the blood inside the heart at the moment of death, which meant it was incredibly rich with mana and life force. Lastly, the core, which acted as mana center to store and concentrate mana for spells. Al had already reserved that one for her own uses, she had just bragged a little with it. The Drago Knight was a stone that could grow in the brain of a dragon. Not all dragons had one and it was not necessarily legendary, but this one was. It was more coincidence than certainty. A lucky drop, so to say. Although it was a stone, it was more of tonic fro dragon keen, than a crafting materials for Seth. Of the legendary materials Al brought back, only 2 were of interest to the blacksmith. 3, but the core was Al's. First and foremost, the heart scales, which were the big armor plates meant to protect the heart. They were premium material for mage armors. Judging by his estimations based on the eyes of the maestro, the scales had not only the capabilities to strengthen the magic and mana of the wearer, but also negate a certain percentage of damage, just like his own. His guess was around 30 to 40% damage negation. The other was the blood. Although the heart and blood were actually alchemy materials, and not legendary for his main profession, Seth had a certain interest in them for 2 reasons. The Ravenous Sog and the Draconic Blade. The Ravenous Sog was a relic-rated growth weapon Seth had made a while ago. Since then, the biggest growth it had experienced was when it sucked away a pool of blood potion meant to create a god's avatar. It was only natural that he was curious about what would happen to it if it were allowed to absorb legendary dragon blood. The Draconic Blade, on the other hand, had been with Seth ever since before he returned to Earth. He had lent it out sometimes, but it usually returned to his hands after a while. He had forged the blade from wyvern fangs, and during its growth, it had gained a certain animosity to dragons, making it the Draconic Blade, which dealt extra damage to dragons. According to the appraisal, the weapon itself had reached its peak and could no longer grow by absorbing blood. However, the flavor text promised a miraculous transformation. Once it tastes the blood of a dragon, the item will evolve to become a legendary Dragon Slayer blade. Seth was curious. Would drinking actual dragon blood allow the weapon to fulfill this requirement, break through the limitations of its own material to evolve further? The blade was already relic rated, although its damage fell a little short of what would be expected from that rating. Worst case, nothing happened. Best case, there might be an interesting surprise. Although the blacksmith only had use for some of the legendary materials, the rest of the massive heap was all for him. The legendary parts only made up a small portion of the dragon's materials, but the rest wasn't trash, it was all relic rated. Apart from the legendary stuff, there were 100 Sky Dragon armor scales, 500 Sky Dragon Scales. 50 Sky Dragon Teeth. 20 Sky Dragon Claws. 10 bales of Sky Dragon Leather. 3 bales of Sky Dragon Wing Leather. 100 liters of Sky Dragon Blood. 3 bundles of Sky Dragon Tendons. A complete Sky Dragon Skeleton, various bones broken. Although these were not legendary, they were relic-rated materials of superior quality. On top of that, Seth intended to experiment with them, using his path as the legendary forger. He had already gotten the idea to try and upgrade the materials of the Guyver to dragon materials, but never tried it because he lacked the power of existence. Now, he had a good amount and was gaining a lot daily, and compared to the Guyver materials, which were only relic-rated materials from a species related to dragons, these were materials from an actual dragon. The cost will probably be infinitesimally smaller. He hoped. The difference between the armor plates and the heart plates was actually not that big. The armor plates were estimated to be able to negate up to 30% of incoming damage, the bigger difference was in their capability to strengthen magical ability, which lagged far behind the heart scales. Once he worked with heart scales, he hoped that he would be able to at least upgrade the armor scale to legendary material without paying too much of his power of existence. As for the rest, the bard didn't dare to hope that he would be able to do the same for the ordinary scales. Although they were sturdy, their damage negation only ranged between 5 to 15%, and while their mana and magic power enhancement was less than half of the armor plates. Taking that into consideration, he doubted that it would be cheap. It was similar for the rest of the materials. Considering the power of the legendary effects of dragons, he had to seriously consider whether it was worth the investment to upgrade all of them, either using the ancient dragon effect or the effect he hoped to gain from the heart scales. Well, it would still be cheaper than using it on an ordinary item, but he also had the bones of an ancient dragon collecting dust in a valley outside. Although Tatzel had eaten a portion, there was still a lot. Maybe it was easier to find a way to get rid of the curse? Then he could keep his power of existence to raise his level. He would see what the future brought. For now, he wasn't going to process these materials anyway. A knock on the door and the door immediately swinging open told him that his guests had arrived. "Hello, Seth. Oh, is that your new assistant you talked about?" Very impressive, Tord entered the workshop with a greeting, and checked out Run standing beside Seth with interest. Right behind him, another figure appeared in the "I came as you asked. What is that big project you mentioned?" Nico Booz asked, as his eyes wandered through the workshop, stopping at the golems and the materials stacked up on one of the tables. "We are still waiting for someone." "Please wait a moment," Seth asked the tailor to wait, but the next moment a third and four-height person appeared at the door. "I'm not late, am I?" Grant May asked, sweating a little from running down to the workshops. "You asked me to come by, what's up?" Whedon asked relatively relaxed, in stark contrast to the enchanter. One just had to cross the corridor, the other had to run down a few flights of stairs. "Don't worry, everyone is on time." He had invited the greatest masters and disciples of the tower, except Nadal, who was working on Mina's equipment, to top work with him on the ultimate project. The blueprint for a set of legendary armor made of the Sky Dragon materials. Chapter 1326 The Right Idea. With this many materials, technically a full dragon corpse, it would have been weird if Seth had not considered making a dragon golem and using the materials to rebuild the dragon. However, he had not done so for 3 distinct reasons. The first was that this would have been disrespectful toward Alzalsar. These were the remnants of her nemesis, the result of a revenge 200 years in the making. There was no way the sorceress would be happy to watch the blacksmith reassemble her archenemy, even if it was just a puppet. Secondly, he didn't even have the materials for it. Of course, he had the materials right here, but not the most important one to make a useful golem. A soul. The work of the past weeks, especially the horsemen and Hellion before them, had drained his stock. Even Sandra Irving's stock of souls she was managing for Tinamol had been drained for the most part. Even if there were still some objectively good souls, none of them caught the bard's fancy. He could only hope for Tinamol to return soon and rebuild some stock, or he would have to go get some himself. Lastly, it was because the potential of golems was limited. Obviously, golems without a soul had no growth at all, but even the ones that were granted a soul by the blacksmith would show a varying limit, depending on the quality of their soul. Even if they grew slowly. On top of that, golems with souls were like ordinary players, they all technically had a max level somewhere, and only a few of them had the potential to breach level 100. As for becoming a legend? Unless something very special happened, there was very little chance. Although Seth's collection of legendary automatons may suggest otherwise, but how often was a golem blessed to become the reincarnation of a deity? Or inherit the powers of a myth to become legends? Even Ceres, the only golem that became a legend of its own right, was the soul of a tyrannical storm elemental that had been trapped in a spear for centuries before it gained a semi-elemental body made of high-quality materials. On the other hand, Orihumas and players blessed by the system god had no natural barriers to overcome. They just needed to fulfill the requirements and level up to make their way to becoming a legend. So, wasn't using the materials to help as many people as he trusted reach the legendary status the only logical decision? At least it was much better than wasting them on one, albeit really cool and strong, golem. And that is why I assembled the Masters of Minas Mar to come up with the best possible armor set our skills can accomplish with these materials. Seth ended his motivational speech toward the people assembled, as he presented the materials to them. Toward the dwarf he had learned from for a while, who had a higher skill level in blacksmith and enchantment than Seth himself. Nico Booz, who had attained the master tier as a tailor. Sivri, who shared his skill levels, but had more experience as a goldsmith. Run, who also shared his skill, but was a genius in arcane enchantments. And of course, himself. In addition to the five of them, there were Grant May, their rising enchanter, as well as the dwarves Hone and Whedon, the two closest to becoming masters. They were mostly here for a learning experience, but also to offer a fresh perspective in case they had any ideas. Just creating set items was not easy, but creating ones with completely new materials was very hard. This was why Seth had invited people with higher and differing expertise from his own, intending to make the best possible set, despite his own lacking. There was no arguing, all of them were craftsmen and couldn't wait to get their grubby hands all of the legendary and relic-rated materials. The next hour was spent purely inspecting and assessing the materials, before they even started to discuss what to make of them. I think everyone got a good look at the materials, and we have roughly the same understanding of them. So? Any ideas so far? With those innocent words, one of the most serious and hard-fought conversation in Minas Mar's history began, involving 5 master craftsmen sharing their opinions, ideas, and expertise. The blacksmith instantly realized that he would be here for a while. And he would be right. They spent almost 2 hours giving everyone to state their ideas and discuss them among each other. Of course, everyone spoke from the position of their own experience and expertise, but 2 main ideas were surfacing pretty early on and kept being discussed. One was Seth's hope to make a cohesive set from the dragon materials. Something like the lunatic set, which was also a complete set of mage armor. Since the dragon material had similar aspects to Ithildan, he thought they would be able to do something similar with this. However, a drawback that came up during their talk was that the function of the lunatic set, which was to deflect and absorb the power of incoming spells, was going to be disrupted by the dragon's damage-negating property. The enchantment, as it was, would never be able to show its full potential. Seth understood that, but he also wasn't happy with the other main idea, mostly supported by Whedon, Hone, and Nico. They argued that since the materials were this powerful in their own right, it would be more productive to further enhance them with powerful enchantments individually, instead of trying to attune every piece of armor to each other. It's actually not that hard to do both, Tord finally spoke up, after listening to everyone. He had talked a little about enchantments and armor design that would fit the materials, but mostly listened to everyone for the latter part. Seth has the right idea, but you are exaggerating. Your own ambition is standing in your way. Since we are using the materials that share the same origin and powers, we can create the set effect with proper armor engineering, not wasting any of the enchantment places on the armor. Tord suggested his own idea. Remind yourself of your wyvern armor. You didn't have your current knowledge, yet it easily gained a powerful set effect, because you used materials from the same origin, which empowered each other. This way we can give each piece powerful individual enchantments, and still harness the potential of a set effect to the fullest. He glanced at Whedon and Hone. And you guys? I can't blame the tailor, but how can you call yourselves dwarven blacksmiths and try to drop any notion of a set effect, when it's practically presented to you? He asked them grumpily. At Tord's suggestion, Seth sat back speechless. The dwarf was right. One could say that he had been blinded by his own knowledge. He had been so intent on forcefully create a set through enchantments that he forgot that creating a set effect could be very simple. Especially, if he was able to tie them together with a soul. He was shocked, but really glad that Tord was here. Not just the meeting, but that he had come to stay with him on Earth. It was clear that he still had a lot he could learn from him. After Tord spoke up, their discussion cleared up a lot, and they were finally able to make progress. They were in the middle of a discussion on the design of the armor to ensure the pieces would harmonize and improve the set effect, with Tord leading the conversation, when Seth's communication orb started ringing. Who was calling him at this time of day? Seth, I have something to inform you about, but you have to promise not to get angry, Lena's strained voice spoke up. His good mood gone instantly. What had happened for Lena to start the conversation like that? Fine. What is it? The bard gave an empty promise. Whether he got angry or not depended on what she was going to say. Jane and her expedition have been captured by the Light Church of Pericon. The Inquisition accused them of heresy, she reveled with a heavy voice. What? Chapter 1327 Heresy. Peririon, a day ago. Inside a vast, lavishly decorated room filled with furniture oozing the aura of highest quality craftsmanship that could be bought with money, sat Jane, Jonah, and Monique on a sofa covered in extravagant embroidery. With them being used to Earth's modern minimalism, this was so over the top that it hurt their eyes. After Monique and the others had not resisted being detained, they had been brought to this room where they were under house arrest. Earlier, a group of paladins and dungeon busters had suddenly charged into their quarters at the Imperial Palace. They didn't even have the chance to get some proper rest, not to mention meeting that emperor who had invited them. Monique had been in the mood for a bloodbath. She liked this world less and less. Her dream of some light traveling and sightseeing in a different world had been crushed. Now, she was just a very pissed and disillusioned woman with the power to lay a city to waste. She might have just gone and flattened that stupidly huge cathedral if it wasn't for Jane insisting on not resisting the detention. At least they didn't dare to put them into some kind of dirty prison cell or dungeon. But even if their cell was so richly decorated that it hurt the eyes, it was still a prison. They had been stuck here for over a day and were properly cut off from communications. One could say what they wanted, but these people were at least capable of jamming the communication orbs. Without being able to contact Minasmar or anyone telling them what exactly was going on, there was not much left of Monique's fuse. Across from the three on the sofa sat a familiar young man. Emissary Alton, a herald of the Emperor, was the man who invited them to the capital in the first place. He had come for a visit to explain the current situation just before a catastrophe unfolded. It's Bishop Puffin again. They have accused you of heresy, as the priest apparently found the aura of an external god on your person. They spread the rumors that you were followers of evil gods, explaining your strength, he said with an annoyed sigh. He seemed almost as unhappy about the situation as they were. The bishop himself wouldn't be a problem, but even the nobility close to the Holy See have brought forward their concerns that the emperor was colluding with evil outer gods. He was unable to oppose this temporary detention to investigate your true nature, he said the last part as if imitating a dumb idiot. What about the rest of our expedition? Jane asked calmly. She didn't seem concerned by the current situation. They have also been put under house arrest. Although some guard of the church tried to take their equipment away, they were unable to go through with it. They are in a similar situation to you, except that their rooms aren't as good. It was the best His Majesty was able to do. Don't worry, once the suspicions are cleared, we will make sure to clear your names, he assured them. While Jane looked a little uncomfortable and Jonah stayed silent, Monique was not in the mood to hold back in this awkward silence. I have bad news for you, buddy. All of us bear the power of the system god, and some of us gain exclusive blessings from various gods that extended their hands towards Earth. Like, what the heck are you fanatics even expecting? She asked, incensed. She was no longer interested in whatever was happening in this world. She was too pissed to keep her sense of wonder. We come from a different world, why the heck would we believe in your piddling backwater god? And what happened to my demon, Isn't all of this just a huge hoax for those useless bastards to take my captive? It broke out of the chosen of Athena, who was simply fed up. Monique, calm down, Jane tried to speak up, but Monique only acquired a new target. Why should I? What makes you think these guys even tell us the truth? All of this act could simply be them playing good cop/bad cop with us. The church is playing the bad guy so these guys can ingratiate themselves with us. Oh, the church is acting so haughty, but we the royal family are the nice guys that only want a good relationship with you my ass. Lady Monique, that's... Alton spoke up, shocked. Monique, please stop. Jane tried to stop Monique again, but she was interrupted by an unexpected supporter. No, listen to her. I agree with Monique. These guys are insulting our intelligence with this act, Jonah suddenly spoke up. Like Monique, he had traveled through a few system worlds to raise his level of existence. He got some experience. Modern people like to underestimate the scheming of less advanced civilizations were capable of. Although Jane probably had lost most illusions about human nature while surviving the apocalypse, she had not experienced other cultures of the system worlds. She still couldn't see past the facade of a primitive culture. These guys loved to act like religion and state were opposing forces, when they were actually working together most of the time. Exactly, these people won't understand shit until you start throwing your weight around, Jane. We are the envoys of Mina's march. How dare they treat us like this just because of the whining of a bunch of nobles and clergy? It's not like we asked to come here. We were invited. Monique ranted, empowered by Jonah's support. Monique, please calm down. Let's not do anything we might regret, Jane begged her. The merchant was quite clear that she was unable to stop Monique if the spearwoman really intended to do something tragic. Monique glanced at Jane before heaving a deep sigh. Fine, let's do it like this. You, she suddenly exclaimed, pointing at Alton. Her arm was like a spear, and the herald was sure she could kill him with her bare hand as easily as she could with a spear. Tell your emperor that he has exactly 2 days, or we will walk out of here, whether his buddies or enemies like it or not. We are not desperate enough to deal with your bullshit. We will simply return, and there is nothing you can do to stop us, she gave an ultimatum instead of doing what she said immediately. If there was one thing clear, it was that these guys were way more desperate to gain a strong ally than Minasmar was to find another food source. If they were telling the truth, Mongkyu truly had no interest in dealing with their bullshit. If this was their ploy, they would rein in their dumb schemes within the next 2 days and hopefully come clean with them. Having said her mind, the chosen of Athena turned away wordlessly and left the room, going to an adjacent salon to finish her act/rant. Soon after, Jonah joined her, too. Well done. At some point I even thought to see some genuine rage. Great acting. They will think twice before pulling stunts like this again, Jonah praised her. He was also convinced that a situation as stupid as this had to be the ploy both parties planned. It's because there was some genuine rage. How dare they make us come this far and bother us with this kind of child's play? I still think we shouldn't even have come here. We should have made our deal with Clutcher and Blackfeather and left it there, Monique grumbled. HMHM, if it were you or me calling the shots, you are right. But that is why Jane makes the decisions. She embraced the merchant class and is hunting profit like a bloodhound, the vampiric swordsman joked. But that's why Seth and Mary gave her the command. I guess you are right. Let's hope this little theater was enough for these people to get their shit together. Whether they were honest or just scheming, they should realize that they can't treat us like this. Chapter 1328 Sky Dragon Heart Blood. Minasmar. Geez, so the situation is already dealt with, the blacksmith asked, annoyed but also relieved. Although he trusted especially Monique and Jonah to have the strength to protect the expedition, who knew what could happen in a foreign world, so far away from home? The fact that they were able to block even the comm orb was one of these unwanted surprises. That's why I told you to listen first and not to get upset, Lena countered, having explained the news Jane had reported back, after they were released from their house arrest. Seth nodded, leaning back on his chair. He was currently alone with his assistants. They had discontinued their craftsman meetings so Seth could hold this conversation in private. Although it was not necessarily classified information, none of them were interested in Minasmar's business, apart from their crafting. If Seth was just a normal member of Minasmar and the people on a mission weren't his close friends, he may not have cared much either. Any other news? The blacksmith finally asked Lena, since there was not much to do for him, since Tord and the others were gone. Not a lot. Mike is currently helping Adam. Love and Reiki are still negotiating with the Dark Elves. Cade reported back. Apart from the cultivator staying at the Pythian village, there were no signs of Sex trying to settle in the vicinity of Little Gamma. Python's presence is probably a big deterrent. We have not heard much from Kutun and his people after signing the treaty, but the rise in volcanic activity close to Delta has slowed. The princess counted a few normal news and updates that came to mind. On that note, I will announce the treaty with the magma spirits in 2 weeks. You should take part in the press conference, she informed him after a moment of thought. And Nam found that girl, Kiki, that was in contact with them. After an interview, we have employed her as part of our marketing team, she added. Oh, so she did have some talent for propaganda, the blacksmith asked, glossing over the matter with the press conference. Yet, although her glass is ordinary, her talent with words isn't bad. Maybe we could send her to Bard College, Lena suggested. And don't think you can get around participating in the announcement. Mina and Finn already agreed, she sneered. Tisk, fine. Fine. I will be there. If this were all, I'm hanging up now. When Lena didn't stop him, he ended the call and put the magic orb aside. It wasn't late yet, so he mused about closing shop early, but then he remembered something he could do for now. Since he still had time, he decided to do his experiments with the draconic blade and the ravenous sog. But he only took a small part of the blood for this, as the blood was a potent elixir of its own right and could be further refined to a potion. Sky Dragon Heart Blood, crafting material. Legendary. The heart blood of a sky dragon is infused with the creature's mana and life force. Drinking it raw comes at a risk, but is guaranteed to raise strength, endurance, magic power, and mana. There is a low chance of inheriting dragon-specific traits like animal language, dragon speech, or iron skin. Refining the liquid will lower the risks and improve the potency. His eyes of the maestro and his skill alchemy craftsman leave 4 allowed him to appraise the blood, but he had no confidence in refining it. The same applied to the dragon heart and the ordinary dragon blood. He rather left these materials to the professionals, at least when it came to alchemy. Of the 20 liters of legendary heart blood and the 100 liters of normal blood, Seth had only claimed 2 and 10 liters, respectively, for his trials, saving the rest for the alchemy laboratories once Lena and Evie returned. The blacksmith prepared a small basin for the 10 liters of dragon blood. For the 2 liters of blood, Seth had to become a little more creative, as 1 liter for each blade was not a lot. Using some sheet metal, he created bath not unlike quenching tubes, that fit the 2 blades almost like sheaths. Looking at the basin of relic-rated crimson liquid, Seth thought for a moment that this might already suffice to fulfill the prerequisites mentioned in the item description, but Seth was not going to risk the dragon blade having an incomplete awakening because he skimped on the blood. As for the ravenous sog, there was no doubt in Seth's mind that it would benefit from both baths, which was why he was more interested in what the draconic blade would do. But before he placed the blade in the blood, he had to prepare it. The wording in the flavor text was not quite clear. That could mean he had to directly harm a dragon with it, but when the sword itself was able to absorb blood, it could have also meant that it needed to absorb the blood. There was no way to fulfill the first interpretation with this method, but he could force the second. The Kriegsmesser had lost the ability to improve itself by absorbing blood, but not the ability to heal itself with blood. What he did next hurt him in his soul, but he started randomly beating the blade with his hammer, warping and denting it until its durability had fallen to less than half. Now, it would have to absorb the dragon blood to repair itself. In the meantime he had placed the ravenous sog in the basin of relic-rated dragon blood, where the sword greedily absorbed the crimson liquid, only visible by the fact that it looked like the basin was slowly draining. After straightening it out a little so it fit again, Seth placed the draconic blade in the sheath filled with legendary blood. At first, nothing happened, and doubt started appearing. Maybe his interpretation was wrong? Maybe he would have to nick Tetzel a little with the sword, once he ascended to dragonhood? However, as he held the sheath of thin metal in his hand, he felt it slowly heating up. The heat kept rising and the blood within started boiling, before blazing aflame with a bright yellow fire spewing from the mouth of the sheath, enveloping the hilt. What in the world is going on, the blacksmith thought to himself. Although the heat and fire couldn't hurt him, he couldn't see what was happening to the weapon. It was so bright he couldn't even appraise it. This definitely wasn't what he expected when he read will evolve to become a legendary dragon slayer blade. Ding! One of your items has evolved into a legend. Plus 100p of power of existence. After roughly 15 minutes of spewing fire and sparks, the reaction finally calmed down. Now the Kriegsmesser rattle inside the metal sheath, it seemed like all the blood inside was gone or burned away. Whether this was something sad depended on what happened to the blade. The long, single-edged blade with a slight curve to it, had turned a deep black, as if it was burned or covered in soot, but when the blacksmith tried to rub it off, he found that it really was the smooth blade itself, just that it changed color to black with a dark luster. With an askant look, Seth checked the window of the appraisal. This was not what he was going for, but Dragon Burned Messer. Epic Wyvern set 1/4. Legendary. Physical damage 2600, new plus 1000. Mag damage 2000, new. Durability, 6,000, new plus 2,000. 1 will absorb blood to heal itself. 2 will absorb part of the target's blood to heal and strengthen the user. 3 Dragon Nemesis, new. 4 plus 70% power to spells, new. 5 plus 300% damage against armors. 6 plus 300% damage against enemies that have lost their motivation. 7 active skill Lacerate. A Kriegsmesser forged by Master Smith, the first Master Blacksmith and Master Enchanter of Earth. The weapon that was pushed past the limitations of its materials through a plethora of treatments, ultimately evolving into something akin to a Dragon Slayer blade. The last sentence. It was the last sentence that told Seth that, albeit succeeding in making the blade evolve, he had failed to make it a Dragon Slayer blade. He had not been able to take advantage of the wobbly wording, but he was not unhappy. Not at all. Where the Draconic blade seemed lacking compared to its relic rating, the Dragon-burned blade had improved massively, especially in the basic stats. Its durability and physical damage rose, while it also gained magic damage. The blade now also had improved spell damage, and it had gained a new trait. Dragon Nemesis took the place of additional damage to dragons. Where the blade previously only dealt 50% additional damage, it now dealt 200% damage to Dragonkeen and created wounds that negated their natural healing. Now his old companion had truly become a weapon that didn't need to hide among his other creations. Chapter 1329 Number 2. Since the Dragon-burned Messer, apart from the name, had not changed much, there was no reason to test the new blade. Happy with the first experiment showing great results, Seth turned to the Ravenous Sog, which had absorbed the 10 liters of relic-rated dragon blood. Although the sword had absorbed the dragon blood, there was no massive change in the effects of the blade. Only the fifth effect, which added 60% to the damage of skills, had improved to plus 70% for skill and spell damage. Seth didn't intend to discount this improvement, but it was no great change in the appraisal result. It didn't seem like much compared to what happened to the Draconic blade. On the other hand, the fact that relic-rated blood couldn't even raise its durability or damage meant that the weapon was just that good already. What really mattered was what the legendary blood would be able to do to the blade. Anticipating this, Seth filled the scabbard he prepared for the Ravenous Sog with heart blood before sheathing the sword. The reaction was much quicker and more volatile than earlier. There was no slow heating up or fire. In one moment, the sheath made of sheet metal was glowing bright white, the next moment, sparks of molten metal flew across the workshop, as the scabbard exploded, leaving Seth with only the Ravenous Sog in his hand and molten metal all over his clothes. Ding! One of your items has evolved to become a unique weapon. Seth heard the notification before he took a look at the sword in his hand. Unique? He had expected the Ravenous Sog to follow suit and also become a legendary weapon upon absorbing the blood of a dragon, but it seemed like that was not the case. At first glance, there was almost no change. The Ravenous Sog was a traditional long sword, the shape perfected for combat, and it still was. Unlike the dragon-burned blade, the sword stayed a pristine silver. If anything, it had gained an even brighter luster. The only visible change to the Ravenous Sog was a clear diamond-shaped gemstone that had appeared on the ricasso at the base of the blade, right above the hilt. The blacksmith had never set any stones in his blades, so it had to be a change brought about by the growth. Curious what all this was, he finally appraised the sword. Ravenous Sog. Unique, growth, new. Physical damage 3300, plus 300. Mag damage, 2000, new. Durability, 7500, plus 500 new. 1 will absorb blood and soul to repair and strengthen itself. 2 will absorb part of the target's blood and soul to heal and strengthen the user. 3 active skill, Lacerate. 4 passive skill, Strength of the Sky Dragon, new. 5 plus 100% skill and spell damage, plus 30% new. 6 plus 100% magic damage, plus 20%. 7 plus 50% damage in dark places. 8 absorb willpower on hit. 9 greater curse of lethargy on hit. 10 spectre bane on hit. 11 overeating. 12 curse of obedience on hit. 13 mana core, new. 14 plus 1500 mana. An exceedingly excellent sword created by Master Smith, the first Master Blacksmith and Master Enchanter of Earth, with minute attention to detail and a clear function in mind. The superior craftsmanship improved its performance to its physical limits, while the enchantments lend an opportunity for growth. After Grand Sorceress Alzalsar had bestowed the sword with powerful enchantments, craftsman Smith further modified the sword using mysterious and terrifying means. Once this sword becomes widely known, play a role in the user's ascent to a legend, or absorb enough souls, the item will become legendary. Seth blinked a few times and cleared his throat when he saw the various changes the Ravenous Sog had gone through. Starting from the top, its rating had changed, and its base stats had improved. Like the dragon-burned messer, it had also gained 2000 magical damage as base damage. The luster both weapons exhibited was a visible indication of the magical damage, like a permanent mana blade. Addition skill and spell damage had also improved again, now doubling either. The additional magic damage on attacks, which was separate from the sword's basic magic damage, had also improved. Strength of the Minotaur becoming Strength of the Sky Dragon, a new trait, and additional mana were the most obvious changes. The change in the passive skill was quite impressive. Where Strength of the Minotaur only added 25 points to Strength and Endurance, Strength of the Sky Dragon now added 100 points each. As awesome as that was, the new trait, Mana Core, was even more special. It allowed the Ravenous Sog to create a mana core that could store and circulate mana more efficiently, just like a dragon could. Obviously, this was the trait of a dragon, the sword had inherited, and the direct cause for the sudden appearance of a decorative jewel and the last new effect, the additional mana. Now, the sword had a physical mana container the user could use, too. Previously, its mana came purely from its soul, which was not big enough to provide additional mana. The question was, would the new mana storage capability grow? The blacksmith decided that he would have to use the Ravenous Sog the next time he went adventuring. He usually didn't use it because the greedy bastard ate the souls of its victims to grow, voiding one of the points of adventuring, which was collecting fresh souls. Usually, the Ravenous Sog was a weapon meant for enemies he really disliked. Now, some creatures would have to say goodbye to their souls, so Seth could see how the new abilities affected the weapon. But that would not happen today. The blacksmith head was fine stopping here today and quickly go to his beautiful girlfriends. Asterion was alarmed by a sudden sound. A low rustling and a quiet scraping over stone. Not uncommon in a mountain valley, but the direction was important. The mighty Minotaur had been standing guard over the Valley of Bones, as it came to be called because of the heap of giant dragon bones slowly corroding the environment with their curse. The gatekeeper of Minas Mar had been enjoying the change of pace at his new workplace, as he stood guard in a new environment. Protecting the loot and the Imuji felt more important compared to his time standing in front of the secret entrance to the Magic Tower's underground cave. With his massive labrys ready, the Minotaur followed the direction which the sound had come from. It was close to the massive dragon bones Seth had left here for a lack of storage. The scraping became louder and the bovine guard spotted a small patch of loose gravel close by. In the light of the stars and the moon, he was able to make out movements, fitting the scraping. Was a thief trying to dig a tunnel past his vigilant eyes? If that was the case, Asterion would have felt tempted to let them take some away. The bones themselves were marked by a powerful curse that would harm any ordinary thief. The loot itself would be their punishment. In that sense, Asterion's presence was more to protect everyone else from the bones than to protect the treasure from thieves. That was if it were a normal thief. With a quick and rigorous stab, he sunk the butt of his labrys into the soft spot of gravel. With a yelp, 10 meters of rock floor broke open and a black, serpentine beast surfaced from the ground. Tatsul! I told you that you can't do this, the Minotaur reprimanded the young pseudo-dragon that had tried to snack on the cursed candy. Ouch! But did you have to be so rough? The Imuji pouted, holding its paw that was struck by the guard. No, otherwise you won't learn it. You can't just wake up once in a while and eat all the materials here. How am I supposed to explain to Seth, when he returned, and there is less than a quarter of the original skeleton left? But, I need just a little more too. No, you said that the last few times, and it was never enough. I doubt that, even if you eat the whole skeleton, it would be enough to reach the legendary status. Instead of trying to cheat your way there, you should contact the others already. They are worried for you. Asterion didn't give in to the child's tantrum. Although he was no older than the Black Snake, he seemed much more mature and responsible. I'm not allowing you to pilfer any more of the dragon bones until you contact Seth and ask for permission. Fine. I will. Was that what you wanted to hear? I will contact Mom and I will tell him that you allowed me to eat bones without his permission. Is that what you want? The pseudo-dragon tried to blackmail the Minotaur in a childish twist of things. Asterion stayed cool. Go ahead. I will just say that you snuck past me using magic. Who do you think he will believe? The little dragon that kept it secret that he was awake, or me, the responsible gate guardian? Asterion said, surprisingly callous. Tatzel's eyes ripped open wide. The snakelet was taken aback when the softy suddenly showed his teeth. He struggled for a moment, trying to come up with a way to resist, but ultimately. I will go home now, Tatzel said harshly and ran off, too proud to admit his defeat. Chapter 1330. Somewhere else. Earth, a supercontinent roughly divided into east and west by the central mountain range. While the people in the east and central somewhat managed to connect past the apocalypse, little was known about the west of the continent. West of the central mountain range, the arcane cold of the mountains clashed with the heat of a vast desert, creating the raging border storm, cutting off any connection to Lambda and other districts of the west. Nobody who set foot in it ever returned. At least not people of Earth. She, the Saintess of Kavala, and what was left of her loyal order of crusaders had done it. Not only had they moved past the treacherous storm that threatened to rip the flesh from their bones, they had also crossed the seemingly endless desert, stretching across the continent past it. Only when Delpharia and her people, exhausted and severely dehydrated from the crossing desert, arrived in a more moderate steppe landscape, could they finally relax a little. Why did they torture themselves on this quest into the unknown? The Saintess followed the oracles of her goddess in search of a new people, but she only truly understood the meaning of her arduous journey when the destination of their pilgrimage was laid out before her. After spending a month traveling across the steppe, they finally met people who helped them reach their goal, Lambda. The center of the west was a district built right in the middle, at equal distance from the central mountains and the western coast. Like a crystal in the desert, it was a massive place of glass spires rising into the sky. The only district Delpharia had been able to lay her eyes on briefly, had been Delta, but Delta could not compare to this. She came from a world of magic, but even the great cathedral she used to serve in, seemed ordinary and simple compared to this place of wonder. Was this truly a place people lived? It seemed more like a utopia, a city of gods. But this was not their true destination. They had already arrived. Do not be blinded by the outward appearance. Look around you and see our new flock. The voice of her goddess brought her back to the present, shortly after she was charmed by the futuristic cityscape of Lambda on the horizon. The religious leader instantly understood what her goddess was implying. The people that led them here, albeit Orihumas of Earth, did not live inside the glorious city of gods. They were living in makeshift shacks and huts, built from mud, stone, and the little wood that could be found in the surrounding. How far these modern people had fallen in their quest for survival. She could feel the gloom radiating from these people. Hopelessness, suffering, depression, and poverty, perfect. Just the right. Fertile soil to plant the seeds of a new religious order. But first, she had to properly understand these people before she could incite them. Arnold, what is that place? She asked breathlessly, playing the innocent and unknowing tourist. Although she may have been unknowing, but she definitely was not innocent in her line of questioning. A city of crystals and beauty, like a paradise on earth, surrounded by people living in poverty and suffering. One didn't need to know a lot to make the conjecture that there was a situation that caused this kind of rift. Arnold, the man that had led them to this slum settlement, looked at the city at the horizon, his face showing a complicated expression. It was like a mix of nostalgia, longing, grief, and anger. Delpharia's heart fluttered in excitement. How could things look this perfect and promising? That place used to be Lambda, one of the districts of Earth. We all used to live there, until that damned central control system suddenly gained sentience. We. Sorry, it's not something I want to talk about. He struggled to speak about the days that followed their apocalypse. However, she was the Saintess of Kavala. Delpharia didn't need the man to get what she needed. Using her skills like mind's eye, empathy, and reader of Kavala, she was able to witness the man's hurtful memories, share a fraction of his emotion, and extract the background knowledge connected to the memories. Arnold was barely leave 50 and a simple warrior, there was no resisting her. He didn't even notice her intrusion. She got everything, but what she got was haunting even for her. The ascent of the machine god, as it came to be called later, was an absolute massacre that had the whole population of the district flee their homes in despair, as the city itself turned against them. The fragmented pictures showed grotesque monsters, automatons built from metal and corpses. The pictures were horrifying, but what made it worse were all the foreign knowledge and concepts flowing into her mind and overheating her brain. "Are you okay?" Arnold asked, seeing the Saintess suddenly struggle to stand straight. He helped her sit down. Thank you. I'm okay now. Although I don't quite understand what you mean by central control system is, I guess it conquered your home. Didn't you think of fighting back? She asked, playing curious, after sitting for a moment and roughly processing the information that just flooded her brain. We tried, many died. Now, it's hard to even consider it, seeing how we depend on their protection, he explained slowly, his visage twisted in disgust and shame. Again, Delpharia received a wave of information, reading the man like a book. Lambda, or Cyber City as its new owners called it, now belonged to a group who called themselves the New Humans. Abominations originating from unholy experiments in hidden laboratories, somewhere in the bowels of Lambda. As a mix of human, machine and merman, they were a species with a semi-hive mind, sharing knowledge and information through a telepathic network. This was not knowledge Arnold directly had, but something he had heard from a survivor of Theta. Apparently Theta was another district on a peninsula at the western coast. That one had been overrun by mermen, until the machines smoked out the whole place and brought people and monsters here. Arnold's knowledge of that time period was sparse, but from what Delpharia could gather, the automatons used humans and merman to create new bodies for themselves. The new humans were the result of and the Advent also explained why Arnold was so full of shame and self-hatred. After gaining bodies of flesh and blood, the monsters that had hunted them, driven them away from their home, and captured them for experimentation suddenly started treating them with something akin to cold compassion. They provided protection taught he surrounding of the city and a minimum of food to the mix of refugees they had thrown out or brought here themselves. The Saintess had traveled these lands and knew that these people barely reaching Leave 50 was only possible because of this protection. The wild was overflowing with powerful monsters. The situation was similar to the time right before they fled their home world through a dungeon. Back then, the dungeon god had flooded their world with dungeons and monsters, in anger over Kavala's actions. Still, despite the modicum of goodwill they showed, humans were banned from entering Lambda. They showed no hostility to the people, but that was not mutual. Even if someone didn't have reason to hate them, their presence was enough to make humans feel uncomfortable. Looking even deeper into the man's subconscious, she also found jealousy and regret, after Arnold watched the new humans, not just rebuilding Lambda, but also improving the base structure into what now looked like a geode of a city. Delpharia didn't care for the complicated past that Arnold was looking back on. She had no interest in who was right or wrong, or who was evil. But it was clear who was easier to use here, and a religion didn't grow on love and forgiveness. Yes, she truly didn't judge, but nothing was better to grow a religion than a crusade against an obviously evil and unfair force. These people were oppressed and abused, and she would be the one to promise them a bright new future.